Good morning and welcome to another edition of Spirit of the Valley. As usual, we have another bunch of lively, talkative, informative people who are involved in a really, really wonderful, worthwhile activity. Most of you know about Youth in Action, but there are some that don't. And we're going to get a little history, a little evolution along the way, and some current news as well. I first want to introduce Maureen Hall, who was the mama of this group and got it going. Kathy Garrity, who took it over for how many years?
13.
13. And it's now in the hands of Chris Lord, who's, I'm sure, doing a great job with it, and we'll find out what's current and what's happening now and in the next months that you know about.
Absolutely.
So welcome. We're really glad you could do this. I'm really glad you could do this because it's a great organization. So, having said we want to evolve with this, let's get a quick snapshot, and I don't mean quick in the way that Kathy does, but a quick snapshot of just what was the impetus. How did you get it going?
How did it get started? Well, that's a pretty important story for me. At that time, my daughter was a freshman in high school, and she had been very involved in going to the community center for the last 2 years, 7th grade, 8th grade, used that as her social center. And then she went into high school, and she felt she was too big for the community center, so she wanted to just go over town. And somehow the mother messages and mom and dad's messages came through, and we didn't think that was such a good thing for a 14-year-old to be doing. So we had a prayer about this at our supper table. And the next morning I was driving through West Lebanon, and the vision of Youth in Action came to me.
Wow. Almost an epiphany.
I haven't spread that around very much, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit that. But I was concerned that if people thought I was getting visions, they might not want their children. Yes, right. So I was really careful about that. But I have to be honest that that's what inspired it, and that's what empowered it. We were talking earlier about all of us that aren't the youth, and we were glad you were just about here.
We're the action. He's the youth.
Right. I remember one project we did, and it was our applesauce project, and we had the big Youth in Action sign on Main Street, and the only one in the picture was Margaret Pierce, who was in her 80s. And I thought, isn't that funny? Well, sometimes we used who we had, and it might have been occasionally just an older person. Okay, so what came next was I knew the community very well, and I selected, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 adults in the community that might be inspired to be part of this. 5 came to my kitchen table, and I told them what the idea was, and they all said, "That's a great idea, Maureen. It won't work. It won't work because high school age kids are focused on themselves, not on others, and they will not participate." Well, they left, and I was left with that sort of impression. In preparing for this, one of the dots, I don't know if any of you heard Mark Zuckerberg's address at Stanford.
Parts of it.
Okay, he used the dots that are part of our life that we can see now played a part. Now we don't know what comes tomorrow. The dots tomorrow we have to believe in. I thought that was a good message, so I put that in. Anyway, one of the dots is that my son, who was then in college, had broken his leg when he was in high school, and I was trying to keep him busy. So I got him involved in Special Olympics. And a friend of his, Wendy Crow, was still a senior at Hanover High School, had done this with him. So I said to Fred for Christmas that year, what I'd like to have you do, don't buy me something, put on a party for Special Olympics at our house and see if Wendy will help you. Well, that's what was going to be happening.
Wow.
But he hadn't talked to Wendy yet. And that afternoon, after sensing that, maybe this wasn't going anywhere, Wendy just happened by, another dot, and I asked her about it. I said, "We're going to do this Special Olympics party, and would you help?" Her eyes filled. She was so touched by her work she was doing with Special Olympics, and she said, I will be there. And that gave me the incentive. One person that had that kind of an emotional reaction to wanting to help was just enough to keep the flame going. And so anyway, we started there, and then we got, we sent out, again, we used postcards. We got ideas from churches of young people that might be interested in this. Sent out a very non-descriptive postcard. We didn't want anybody to say they weren't coming because there wasn't anything on there much to either attract them or distract them. So they were curious, they came. And we had Wendy there who had done some volunteer work, and 2 Dartmouth students who were involved, and they sold the program.
Wow.
And the kids, the seniors, the students that were seniors that year were so excited to get going that they didn't want to wait till next fall, because then they'd be gone.
Exactly.
So we began on a roll, on a real roll. It was a fun part of Youth in Action because nothing had happened yet. So everything was new and fresh. We had to do a lot of publicity. We had to speak on the radio. We had to speak at church groups and civic groups and so forth. And that gave the students a nice chance to put things into words.
Exactly.
Which is one of my favorite topics, is what kids say about things.
Well, it's also a speaking skill is an awesome thing, and most kids are scared to death of it. So it's a wonderful break-in.
Right. I remember one girl talking about our Cambodian project. We were having a benefit dinner, and one of the parts of the program was to have 5 or 6 kids speak about what they were doing. And this girl, she was good in drama, so she could keep speaking through her tears. She was so moved by what she had done with these Cambodian kids.
Great.
One said with Special Olympics, it's Special Olympics that holds my life together. One said about working with senior citizens, now I'm not afraid of seniors anymore.
That's a really good point, because you do a certain amount of work with seniors.
We do. Yeah.
But we did, most of our work initially was with seniors. They were right across the street.
Right.
They were eager to start, and it took off. And there were some one-to-one relationships with seniors, and there were some major events. And at one of them, as 2 older folks were walking out of the banquet room at Hanover High after a getting acquainted party, one said to the other, "Now I won't have to worry about young people anymore." Wow. Quite a brave and
That's
bold
quite a
statement, but it kind of said what that party had done for those people that had gone.
And I think people are until they've done it, are uncomfortable either way, young with old and old with young. And I think that's why the community service that gets kids into nursing homes, or that program still exists. But okay, so what I should do, I'd love to keep moving a little to see how it evolved and see what you brought.
Okay.
You expanded it, I'm sure.
When Maureen decided that she was going to pass the baton, or in her case, the torch, she actually showed up at my house with a torch.
I love that, Maureen.
I asked permission of my children at the time whether I could do this or not, go for this, because they were in the high school.
Yep.
And I knew my presence in the high school needed to be okayed by them.
Exactly.
So they were enthusiastic about it. So I applied for the job, was fortunate enough to be chosen.
Good.
And I was there for 13 years, and I guess it grew from a smaller group to a larger group to a larger group to a pretty significant
What are
number
you
of
saying in
students.
numbers, if you had to guess? When you left, or at your peak? Is there a way to know?
No.
Because they come and go and...
There were, they fill out paperwork at the beginning of the year. But, the number of students who register versus the number of students who are actively involved is very different and in flux all the time.
Yep.
But I had the advantage of having my children in the school, so I knew their friends, I knew their parents. So I was able to bring new adults onto the board. We became an official nonprofit. We went through some of the growing pains of, finding out about insurance and all that sort of thing, and working with the town and trying to make everything come together so that we'd have a viable program to move forward. And we did. Some of the changes I saw when Maureen left off, she had to call everybody to get them to do everything. The beginning of my term, I would call, and then answering machines came in, so I could leave messages. A lot of locker notices, and as I was exiting and transitioning out, we were into email. This guy has brought us up through Facebook
probably
and
tweeting.
websites, and it's
Well, you have
fun
to do
to
it.
see. It's
you
fun
have
to
to do
see.
it. It's what the kids are on, and a lot of adults. And I check my email as often as I can, just because that's how most people communicate with me.
right, right.
But so it grew in number.
It grew in number.
And activity, I'm suspecting.
Activities, I think we built in what Maureen had started, working with children, working with seniors, working with special needs people. I enjoyed a lot of the large group activity. What I most remember are the students that I worked with in smaller groups and one-on-one, some of those special relationships that
Exactly.
evolved. You were talking about the seniors. We had one student who had moved from India and linked him up with two seniors over at the senior housing, and just beautiful things happened.
Oh,
So
that's
those are good
what
memories.
you remember better than anything, probably, of relationships.
Right. And then seeing the students having Youth in Action adopted by sports teams, you know, who were willing to come. They knew they didn't have a lot of time because their sports require them to play, you know, 6 days a week.
Exactly.
But they would, if I worked with the coaches, we could sometimes get them to come as a whole team.
And
get
that
something done.
makes such a huge impression when you see athletes, Dartmouth or Hanover or pros, going to do civic things. I think it really makes them human. I loved it, nothing more than to see some of these professional athletes that go to hospitals and go to veterans' homes and things like that. And that's the kind of thing you were fostering, was
Right.
getting
right.
people who you think are too busy to do something like this. Half of this probably meant more to them than a lot of the things they were doing.
I think in some cases it did. Yeah.
It's awesome. Okay, Mr. IT man.
Oh, IT man.
When did you take over?
This will be the end of my second year.
Okay.
So I took over in the fall of 2010.
Okay. And how did you know about it?
It was just by chance. I think I was looking for a new direction, looking for something new, and looked in the paper, and it was a very, very small ad. Didn't really say a whole lot. I couldn't find a website. I think it said, you know, do community service with teenagers. Something very, very simple. So I sort of just almost applied as a whim, sent my information in, but couldn't find any information about Youth in Action. So I didn't really know what I was applying to, but I'd been a teacher for years.
That's a huge help.
Yeah, and had always wanted to do more community service as a teacher when I was in a school, and said, well, maybe this is the way to do it. So I applied, and I think it was just at the beginning of the process and didn't hear anything for a while, so it sort of slipped my mind. And then I got a call one day and got a chance to interview.
Oh, that's
So it
awesome.
started there.
So it hasn't been it's been fairly seamless, changing
Right.
heads.
There was, I would interject, there was one person between us.
Yep.
Help me, Jessica.
Right, Jessica Eaton. And
Right.
she was in the school. She was in the media center of the school.
right. Oh.
So the link that she brought in was a closer bond with the school.
Yeah.
When we started it, we talked with Superintendent Watson,
Yep.
who was superintendent at the time, and who should sponsor us. And we were, you know, we had already gotten well started, and he said, you're doing so great, independent from the school. I suggest you keep it independent. So there's still that independence
Yes.
from the school, but you need real
But
bonds
you can't
with
do it
your
without the
partners.
school.
You
So-
can't do it without the school, and it's really wonderful to have that kind of
I
help.
think getting to that point is critical, that you can be your own person, and yet you need them, and they've probably come to need you. So a little bit of
It
symbiotic.
became a real partnership, and
Yeah.
especially when colleges started really wanting to know what students had done for community service. And so our record keeping of what students had done with us blended very nicely with the school, and we worked hand in hand, and it was good.
Perfect. So are there things you've added in the short time you've been there, or a different direction you've wanted to go, or anything?
I wouldn't say necessarily different direction. I mean, a lot of the same themes and the same mission has continued.
Yeah.
The challenge that I had coming in, Jessica was in the school. She was very embedded. She had that direct access with students.
Right.
I am not a community member at all. I live in Quechee, so even the Hanover Norwich communities, for me, part of my initial process as director was getting to know the community,
Exactly.
letting the community know who I was, getting to know the school. I have a daughter, but she's 9 years old, so I hadn't worked with students in a long time. So it was about really getting in and making that contact with the school, and one of my goals was to make contact with as many of the other service organizations and different projects that are already existing within the Upper Valley, and
Right.
let them know that they had another resource, that we were, that teenagers, while they're limited in some ways that they can help out based on their age and their experience, but there's so much they can do, and it's such a large pool of potential volunteers.
Yeah.
So really making contact with those organizations and with the community and saying, we're here. And
Well, I've been aware of like ads saying, or articles saying, leaf raking and things that, you can do without a lot of the skill that other
Right.
things require. I was telling Maureen and Kathy before you came, I had a friend just this morning on the way over here ask me if Youth in Action does odd jobs, things in people's homes that aren't big, aren't necessarily needing a licensed person, just
Right.
minor things that maybe they've just gotten. She said, I'm just too old to get on a ladder, and I've got minor little things. And I said, I'll sure know the people to ask this morning. So tell our viewers.
No,
right-
absolutely.
There's your camera.
It's always, you have to look at each project on its own merits.
Right.
But we have individuals in the community that come to us and say, this is, my church has been trying to get this project done. Is there a possibility we can get volunteers to come and help with that? And that's something that we're able to do. We've also had, I think it's been recently that we've got a lot of requests just coming from individuals who might have a yard that needs to be raked,
Right.
or a kitchen they might need painted. And sometimes it's someone who might be limited themselves and might not be able to complete the project themselves, or someone whose schedule is just busy and they want some help. And I think it also is great for the students, because a lot of the students, especially in the summer, are often looking to earn a little extra money.
Exactly.
And I think it gives them that independence, it gives them the experience of working a job. So we have something I just started this summer called the Summer Job Corps, and I've been trying to announce it in the Upper Valley listserv and the Hanover and the Norwich listserv. And it's really an opportunity for anyone in the area to email Youth in Action. And I have sort of a template of what I need from them in terms of the job description,
Right.
how much they might pay, what they're looking for. And already we have a huge group of students signed up to
Fabulous.
receive those posts. And within a day of me sending out a job posting, those jobs are taken. So I think that both groups are sort of getting what they'd
I'm
like.
assuming a lot of this would again bring you back to the student senior population. I mean, often this particular
It
woman
is.
is 80, a very active
Right.
80, but one that's a little nervous about certain minor chores that
Yeah.
her husband used to do.
Yeah.
And
Someone making a smart decision.
she'll be calling. But I think it's important for people to know that this is, you can always ask. It may be something that's
Absolutely.
more than anyone can handle.
Yep.
But you might even have a resource or a place to send them if your kids weren't able to. I mean,
That's true.
who
And that's,
knows?
and that's what I always say, it doesn't hurt to ask. And if it's not something that we can handle, there's usually a good possibility that I'm going to know a direction to point
And
somebody.
that Upper Valley, Vermont, New Hampshire site is awesome for that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Does anyone out there know someone who can blah, blah, blah? And there are answers like that on that site. I've seen it happen daily.
There are.
So what the impression you're getting is that they can do anything. Are you all, and I'm sure you're always looking for more members.
We always, I think that I think they're just under 800 students in Hanover High, and it fluctuates a little bit each year. I know the freshman class was large this year, so there's always that potential. And sometimes I say, what if all 800 students suddenly were to volunteer every weekend? Well, you would have to go out searching
We'd have
for
to create
volunteer
jobs for
projects.
them.
So sometimes it's great that they have lots of other things to do.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily that I would say we are dying for more volunteers, but it's great to have, the larger the pool you have, the more
Yeah.
potential you have when the need arises.
Right.
And for example, when the hurricane hit and there was immense damage from that, and there was huge need spread all throughout the area, you did need almost an army of volunteers to be able to go out and
Exactly.
send everywhere. And so to have them, even if you don't have to utilize 75% of those folks work.
And they're probably fine with that too. I mean, they don't want to be full-time
Right.
anything.
Realistically, they can't.
They want to be asked, and they know they can say no.
Right.
But luckily enough, say yes to get the jobs done, I would guess.
Oh, that's
of
true.
the times.
And with all the other organizations in town, you know, a program like High Horses, for example, or some of the projects that happen at the Children's Hospital, those programs are entirely reliant upon volunteers.
Absolutely.
They don't have, you know, a large number of paid staff. So
That's right.
in some cases, and I would say this to adults or teenagers in the area, if you're interested in volunteering, but you don't really necessarily know where you might go, people can email me and say, you know, these are sort of the interests I have, and I can connect almost anybody. I feel like I've connected now with almost every group in the area.
And we should take advantage of this moment to give your email and website so that people have no excuse for not knowing how to find you.
Absolutely. So the email is very simple. It's YIA@Dresden, DRESDEN.US, and that's my direct email. And we don't have a website. The website's sort of in production, but we're on Facebook. So if you look for us on Facebook, we're there. It has all of our photographs from the last 2 years of our projects, updates, and other resources.
The Facebook was awesome because when I asked Chris if he would be kind enough to send me some pictures that we can insert in this show, he said, just go to our Facebook and take what you want. And I did. But it was worth going through the whole website, even if you aren't looking for specific anything, because the variety of what your members are doing. I mean, you're going to see someone with a senior doing something. You're going to see someone doing something that looks construction related, kitchen work. Is this like a soup kitchen kind of thing I was seeing, or like a pancake breakfast or something?
It could have been the
Yeah.
pancake breakfast. The most, and we actually will be over tonight at St. Paul's Church in White River Junction
next
with
to the Haven.
Listen community dinners.
Yeah.
And so that's a pretty consistent project for us.
And see, this is I don't think anyone realizes how many things you do in terms of being out of the Hanover-Norwich community. In fact, you're probably out more than in that community with a lot of things, I would guess.
It's sort of around the Upper Valley. I mean, I think that we all live in our separate, smaller communities,
Yep.
and I think this has given the students a chance to go, you know, even to the town next door,
Absolutely.
which may seem different in a lot of ways from what
Exactly.
they're used to.
But it started as just Hanover, correct? And
Well,
then
it's
Lebanon
still a
came on
Hanover
board.
program.
Right, but Lebanon.
oh no, we branched
separate?
out. We
Yeah.
had projects in Lebanon. We had projects in White River.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's one of the magics and wonderful things of the Hanover Upper Valley area is that you go a stone's throw from the center of Hanover, and you've got needs that you see that you can help meet those needs.
Right outside this building.
Yes, well, everywhere. I
But
mean,
but more than we think.
Yeah, right.
Or more than kids think.
And I think it makes, and it's easy driving. You know, where in the world could it be so easy?
This is where
Here.
community service, when the 8th grade used to do it as their spring project, I used to do it with, I did one year with a couple of 8th graders, 8th grade boys, and we did a lot of delivering of food and stocking at the Haven. And they weren't really thinking enough about it, I thought, at the time, just doing it by rote. So I made sure the last day of our service, we had some families in there getting their food. And I had them just stand and watch what this woman could pick up for a week's worth of food.
True.
And both boys almost simultaneously said, I eat that much in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the most wonderful finish to that program because they got it.
Yeah, I think what you're making, go ahead, Kathy. I think you're making a really important point, which maybe we haven't stressed enough, is the impact on the kids.
Amen.
When they have an experience, they're changed. I mean,
Yeah.
they go from people who are maybe focused on themselves
Right.
a lot to
Right.
being focused on others, and I think it makes a difference the rest of their lives.
I think they never forget those things. I think you only have to do one meaningful thing for someone, and you are a different person, and it makes you want to do more. That's the good part, too.
And in addition to how many jobs we get done, it's what's happening to those kids doing the
Absolutely.
jobs.
Yeah, and
That's
they're getting
really
extra
critical.
little skills that I mean, who knows when they'll need them again. They don't know, but they will need them. So,
Chris took a bunch of kids in spring break and did a habitat.
see, now there's a classic case of what kids could, and someone out of that group might end up saying, I want to go to Votech. I want to do this for, I mean, there's so much talk now about Ivy League isn't the only track in town. It's a great exposure to say, you know, I'll get out of school and have a job waiting for me. These days, that matters.
This reminds me of one kid. We were going door to door collecting food for the Haven. And this student said to me, "Oh, I'm practicing my social skills." and indeed, she was.
You absolutely are. They don't know at the time
Right.
what they're getting.
One of the best memories I have is when Cover was very, it hadn't started yet. It was Simon Dennis in his truck.
Yep.
And somewhere we met, and so we took Youth in Action kids on some of his very first projects. And I don't know how many people knew Simon, but he was a fabulous person to
met
expose
Simon.
children to. And part of Cover back then was you sat and you had lunch with the family. So you took a break from the day.
Yep.
And to take Hanover High kids and bring them into the situations that some of these people were living in, and have those people give them a lunch, and then sit down and talk with them about
And
what
the kids
this
get way
house
more
meant to them.
out of it than the family
Just
in the
wonderful,
long run, I
wonderful
think.
experience.
Believe it or not, when you have people on a show that are that passionate about it and that excited about it and have a story to tell, it just flies. And you are a classic case of that. And I appreciate so much you're doing this, and I hope it helps other people out there get more aware of it and look you up and hopefully call you up. But
Absolutely.
also, just so the community knows, there are things you can ask to have done. Chris will be obviously very honest about what can and can't happen, and maybe refer you if he can. But I think this whole history, thank you, Maureen, and Kathy, and Chris, but for getting this thing going, because it's just taken off and become a huge deal in this area.